Okay, we're going to finish up chapter 4 of John. If you haven't noticed, and you probably have, but there are not there are not as many chapters in John as are in some of the other Gospels. But boy, does John write a long time before he gets tired and puts a chapter title down, because all the chapters have got a whole lot of verses in them. So it takes a while just to get through a chapter in John. But anyway, we got last week, we got down to verse 43. And so we'll start there tonight. After the 2 days, he left for Galilee. Now, Jesus himself had pointed out that a prophet has no honor in his own country. The problem being that in Jerusalem, no one wanted to listen to him. No one cared to listen to him. No one believed. He had believers in Galilee, so he goes back to Galilee to work with the believers that he's got there. And of course, you notice that phrase is in parentheses, at least in the NIV, in verse 44. A sentence that we use quite often in our everyday language about a prophet having no honor in his own country. In other words, a perfect example, when Lubbock gets ready to do anything, I don't care what it is, we call in experts from Dallas, because there are no experts in Lubbock that could possibly figure out what the problem is. We need expert opinion from Dallas. I'm sure Dallas calls in Fort Worth probably calls in Houston. In other words, a prophet is, in fact, without honor in his own country. All right. So when he arrived in Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him. They had seen all that he'd done in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, for they also had been there. Once when he visited Canaan in Galilee, where he had turned the water into wine, and there was a certain royal official whose son lay sick at Capernaum. When this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and begged him to come and heal his son, who was close to death. Unless you people see miraculous signs and wonders, Jesus told him, you will never believe. All right, you may go, your son will live. The man took Jesus' word and departed while he was still on the way. The servants met with him with the news that his boy was living. When he inquired at the time when the son had gotten better, they said to him, the fever left him yesterday at the 7th hour. Then the father realized that this was the exact time at which Jesus had said to him, your son will live. So he and all his household believed. This was the second miraculous sign Jesus performed, having come from Judea to Galilee. All right. Several things here of interest. One is that Jesus goes from his home country back up to Galilee, and the Galileans are glad to see him because they do believe. They've seen the miracles. They've seen miracles. They've seen signs. And when the man asked him, would he heal his son? Well, Jesus' response is really unique, because he says, unless you people see miraculous signs and wonders, you will never believe. Well, what does he mean by that? Well, what he's trying to do is get them thinking past the physical and into the spiritual. In other words, if all you think I am is a miracle worker or a healer or a food provider or a water to wine guy, you're missing the point. So he said, you got to get past the physical and consider the spiritual. And this is what he's always trying to get the people to see what's going on. So this man, nobleman, he's called in some versions, says, my son is sick and please come and heal him. Now, I don't know what the man knew of Jesus, other than he'd been told. He'd probably maybe seen he could have been at the wedding feast for all I know. I mean, he could have been. I don't think so. Doubt it. But there's a lot of possibilities of where he could have seen Jesus, but he doesn't question it. He simply says, you can do it. You can do it, and all you have to do is come down before my child dies. Jesus replied, you may go, your son will live. Now, why would the man believe that? I mean, he didn't do anything. Jesus didn't do anything. At least with the water to wine, he at least, got the water jugs filled up and all that. And
basically, Jesus assured him that his son will live, and that's what he got out.
And he was a true believer because he left where he didn't say, well, why? Show me how I know that. How do I know that? I mean, I think that's a fairly normal reaction you'd have. Well, okay, and it's not that I don't believe you, but I don't believe you. I need you to show. But he doesn't do that. He immediately leaves and goes back home, toward his home anyway. And when he gets there, or before he gets there, of course, the servants meet him. And they're just excited as all that because for some reason unknown to them, the son who was near death is now healed. And Jesus, and then of course the question he raises is, when did this happen? And they say about the 7th hour. And he thinks about it and he goes, that's pretty close. Of course, it was exactly, but remember they had sundials, so they can't cut it to the minute, to the second, to the 10th of a second. But he's very much assured that when Jesus said your son will live, is when the fever broke and the son's doing much better. Now, let me ask you a question, because this is one that, and we haven't talked about this on the previous one. I wanted to wait for this one. What is a miracle? I know it's a sign. I got that. I mean, that's not what I'm asking. I want to know what makes an action a miracle.
Something that a normal person can't do.
Okay, a normal person can't do something that happens outside of nature.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, here's my reason for making a point of that. We use the term miracle very loosely. Probably the loosest we ever get is when we talk about the miraculous catch in the football game. Okay, I mean, that's pretty loose. But then there's one that's looser because many of you may have in your refrigerator or in your pantry some Miracle Whip. And you could think it's a miracle that you can eat it. That's one possibility. I can tell you the Hellman's mayonnaise people don't appreciate Miracle Whip at all. But my point being, what is a miracle? The reason I'm asking is because we use it so loosely. Now, I want you to think about this. Someone goes to the hospital with some dread disease, okay? And the doctors do what all they can do. And they always, and I say always, but pretty much always say, Well, it's in God's hands now. I want it to be in God's hands before I go in, not wait for them to do things to me and then turn it over to God, because he may not can undo what they did. But the point is, it's in God's hands. So let's assume for the moment the person recovers. Now, the doctors have given up, basically, and they've said, this is it. And then he recovers. Is that a miraculous recovery?
Well, it could be.
Now, the key here is, how long did this recovery take? Did it take minutes, hours, days? Because if it took minutes, hours, or days, guess what? It's not a miracle. Now, God can work within nature and does to create, cause recovery, health recovery. In fact, you want God doing that if you want the individual to recover, and that's how he recovers. I don't care what the doctor does. You know, the miracle drug, which penicillin was once called a miracle drug, wasn't a miracle drug. It was a drug. It healed a lot of people. It was a good thing. Not saying it's bad, but it wasn't a miracle, because no matter what you took it for, you didn't instantaneously feel better. Okay? So if you got cancer or you got some other disease of which there virtually is no cure for that we know of, and you're in the hospital and they, as is typical of doctors, turn it over to God eventually and say, well, now it's in God's hands, and you recover even from cancer, okay? It's not a miracle. It's God working through nature to bring about your health. I'm saying that very specifically because we have a lot of people who believe that miracles still happen today. They don't. According to what we know from Scripture, the apostles were given the power to do miracles. They laid their hands on people and they gave them different signs, different gifts. One of the gifts was the power to heal. Not arguing that. In the first century, the first generation after the disciples or apostles could do healing if that was their gift. They might speak in tongues or they might do other things, but if that was their gift, they could do that. However, the catch is, or the reality is, that they didn't have the ability to pass it on to anyone else. So all of the gifts, all the spiritual gifts, including healing, including miraculous healing, took place in the first century and up to the last Christian who had been baptized and given the gift of whatever died. And the last time it could be passed on was when the last, which would be John. When John died, the ability to pass that power on to others ended. Why did John say, and we read this earlier, it's later in the book, but we read it the first time we met. Why did John say miracles were even around? That you might believe. Miracles cause belief. Why do they cause belief? Well, because if I see a miracle done, I can more willing to listen to that person who did the miracle and claims to be from God, or that the miraculous power came from God. And therefore, I'm willing to listen. And when he tells me what to do to be saved, I'm willing to believe him. Now, why didn't Peter just flip open his King James version of the Bible and show it to him? Because there wasn't a King James version of the Bible to show it. So the miraculous gifts were given and used not for the good of the people that it helped, but for the idea of creating belief in those that saw it, as well as the person who was healed, of course. But the others that saw the miracle take place are now, once I see the miracle, I go, wow, that's impressive. Well, how'd you do that? Well, where did you get that ability? So, and then of course, I'm able to then tell you about God, about Christ being death, burial, and resurrection, the gospel message, and what you have to do to be saved. And that's the reason there were miracles. If God had wanted to, he could have said to Jesus, tell everyone to be healed. And there wouldn't be a sick person on the face of the earth. And that's all Jesus would have had to say. But that wasn't what God intended. Now, is God a respecter of persons because he only allowed Jesus to heal certain individuals? No, because the purpose of the miracle was to establish belief. And so Jesus would be put in situations or found himself in situations where the miracle would cause the people around to possibly, not always, of course, but potentially had the ability to then believe and listen to Jesus about what was coming with the kingdom and what will happen on Pentecost with the coming of the church and so forth. And then also what must they do to be saved? Jesus will never tell them what to do to be saved. Why? Because he can't, in the sense that it hadn't happened yet. You've got to believe in my death, burial, and resurrection, even though I haven't died, been buried, or be resurrected. That'd be a little hard to sell. But he gets them ready, much like John did, for the coming of the Messiah. Jesus gets people ready for the coming of the church and the coming of the gospel message and the ability to be reunited with God through baptism into Christ's blood. So that was all free. That section was free. You're not going to pay extra for that. However, it will probably come up on the extra credit on the test at the end of the semester. All right. Now, those of you who've been in my classes before know that we're fixing to come on one of my favorite stories of the whole Bible. And it is in John chapter 5. And for those of you who've never been in my class before, think how fortunate you've been, but also consider the fact that you'll see something perhaps tonight you haven't seen before. All right, chapter 5. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for the feast of the Jews. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. One there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, he learned that he has been there in this condition for a long time. He asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. When I am trying to get in, someone always goes down ahead of me." Now, there are a number of things of interest here. One, what is the name of the pool? Bethesda. What does this remind us of? Bethesda Naval Hospital in Washington, D.C., where all the presidents go, okay? If you get sick and you're the president, you go to Bethesda. Wonder where they came up with that name. I wonder why they came up with that name. All right. So here you have an individual who's 38 years old, and he's been trying to get into this water, this pool, at a particular time. Now, why is he interested in getting in that pool? Well, there was, and I think some versions may have it in there directly or not, but there was I don't know what word to use. I always get confused here of what word to use, because there was a legend, there was a myth, there was a reality that an angel would come periodically, apparently not on any schedule, and touch the water. The water would have healing power in it. The first person to get in the water would get healed. I mean, first, second, third, who knows? Now, the problem with the story is that I don't know what's legend and what's not. Okay. I don't know any way to know this. And my theory is that it is true. Now, why it's true, I don't know. But the reason I think it is true is because I can't believe that many people would be fooled that long if something didn't happen miraculously of the people who got in the water. In other words, if blind people got to the water and came out blind, you wouldn't really care to rush down there and do that. There'd be no reason to do that. So there seems to be some reality to the fact that there was a miraculous intervention going on. How long it had been going on, I don't know that anyone knows that either. I mean, was it fairly recent, or did it go back for decades, or what? The people who, there are the one theory, which I don't agree with, but it's one theory is it's more like the hot springs of Arkansas, where people go there to be in the water and in the various springs and receive healing power, not miraculous healing power by any stretch, just healing power, and that some do get better as a result of being in the spring. Now, I'm not going to argue the point of whether they do or they don't. If they don't, it's psychosomatic, and I don't believe there's that many psychosomatic people that want to sit around in the water waiting for something to happen. So that would be up for you to decide. But according to this, the man believed that if he could just get in the water, he'd be okay. But he never gets down there because somebody is always stepping on him or stepping around him or stepping over him, getting to the water before he can get to the water. One has to wonder why he didn't get closer to the water after all these years, how many years he'd been there. I know how long he'd been disabled. I don't know how long he had been at the pool, but he'd been there quite a while, according to Jesus' understanding. But I doubt that he got there on day one. I don't know how he got out of there. I don't know if he spent the night there. I don't know how he got fed. There's so many things we don't know. Okay. But this is what we do know. He was wanting to get in the water, according to what he told Jesus, and he never could. Now, that much you probably have all thought of as you've read this over the years. I'm going to raise a question to you, though, that perhaps you haven't thought of, unless you've been in my class before, and then you thought of it, all right? Verse 6. He asked him, do you want to get well? I've had people tell me that that was a rhetorical question. I would suggest it's not rhetorical at all. If you were to ask me, Roger, do you want to be healed? And you had the power to heal me, I would hesitate and ask you what else you could do. In other words, there's other things that might be more valuable to me right now than being healed. For this reason, and it applies to the 38, the man who's been disabled for 38 years. If I were healed miraculously right now, I would still need all the help I need now because I don't know how to do anything. I can't cook. I can't do laundry. I can't drive a car. I have no license. Do you really want to be healed? In other words, if you built your life around the reality of a disability, whatever it is, and suddenly it's taken away from you or given your sight's given back to your ability to walk or whatever, you say, of course, that'd be wonderful. I could, and then what could you do? Well, you'd have to take a whole lot of tests to get qualified to do a whole lot of things that everybody else around you already done all these years, and you're behind. Also the help someone is getting, whether it's from family or from government or whatever, suddenly it stops. What can Roger do for a living? Roger's never been in that position to be independent enough to do that. And suddenly there's no income except what Roger can earn right now. I can't even sack groceries. Okay, I would have to learn how to sack groceries. Now, I don't think it'd take me too long, maybe, but I've learned that you don't put the eggs or the bread on the bottom of the sack. That much I have learned. But otherwise, there's a lot of things about sacking groceries that you do naturally that I would have to learn how to do. So here's a man who is being asked, do you want to be well? Because what he's got to think through is, you've lived your life this way. However he got there, whatever he did, however he got his money, how much support he got from somebody to buy food, to buy housing, or wherever he lived. If he lived at the pool, I don't know, but he's been there for so long that he's got to have had a lot of help coming from somewhere. If he walks, so does the help. What are you going to do? Because when you're healed, now I don't know this. I have no scriptural grounds to base either side of this argument on. But consider this. When Jesus healed someone, did the healing include giving him the ability to do all the things he needed to do to survive now that he's healed? I don't know. I've often wondered. I mean, you have this is not the only one, of course, of a paralyzed person or a blind person. I mean, you've been blind most of your life, all your life, whatever. You become dependent. You know how to exist, obviously, this long. But you don't necessarily know how to do a lot of things. And suddenly, you're going to be required to do a lot of things. In other words, from a different disability. Let's take a blind person. The minute they open their eyes, they can see. It's wonderful. It's great. We can see all this stuff. But they can't read a cotton-picking word because they've never been taught how to read. Think about that, because that's a shock. We thought, well, that'd be great to be able to see. Wouldn't it be great to see? Well, in our country, in our civilization, in our society, blind people have been taught how to read Braille, for example. And the man could still read Braille even after he got his sight back, and he could teach himself to read, as we read, but not in their country. Braille wasn't around. So all of a sudden now he's got his eyesight back, but he doesn't know what he's looking at. I want to give you that to think about if you haven't ever thought about it, because it puts a bigger challenge out there than what we read here. When you make it a rhetorical question, he was just asking him for the fun of it because he already knew the answer. Well, the man better think that through before he accepts the miraculous gift. And as I said, from my vantage point, personally, there are a lot of things that I would prefer to have accomplished for me miraculously before we get to walking. That's just me. But okay, so the man is asked, "Do you want to be healed?" He says, "Well, I'm trying. I'm doing my part. I just can't get to the water before it stops. They stop rippling or whatever effect the angel had on him." Or if he only healed one at a time, somebody always gets the one healing each time this happens. Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." At once, the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was, of course, a Sabbath. The of course is not there. But that's kind of the way this gets to be by the time we get to this point. Now, it doesn't say he stumbled. It doesn't say he got up slowly. It doesn't say he had to be careful to keep his balance. It says he got up immediately. What's that? It's a miracle. Because it's outside the realm of nature. This is not the way people learn to walk after they've been, their muscles have atrophied, all this kind of stuff. You of all people in this class, most of you have been through enough physical therapy to know how this works. Right, Bill? Amen. All right. So Bill right now is getting over a couple of surgeries, and there's a lot of physical therapy. Many of the rest of you have gone through various disabilities, and you've had to build up muscles. You've had to get your balance back after you've not walked for a while. I wouldn't know this personally, but I understand when you start to walk again, it takes a while to get your bearings and get your balance, and that's why they give you a cane and a walker and all this stuff. You get from one to the other, and then you can walk independently. That's not what happened here. The man got up and picked up his mat, which some of you know, just picking something up off the floor can be challenging. He has no problem. He just reaches down and picks it up and starts walking. Now, one would think that those around would be curious, elated, surprised, but that's not what happens here. No, those things don't come about. Rather, and so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." They completely miss seeing what the man has accomplished, what's been accomplished. The man's walking, for crying out loud. He's been this way for 38 years. They've all seen him by this time. Even people who didn't go to the pool have seen him or heard about him. Because he's always there. And he's the one with footprints on his back from people walking over, getting into the water. That's how you can identify him. Okay, so what do they zero in on? The fact that he's healed? No. The fact that he broke the law. Now, let me assure you that while they said he broke the law, the Sabbath law, there is nowhere in the Torah, okay, which helps us understand by Jewish understanding, the laws and how they apply. Okay, there is no law that says you cannot be healed and pick up your bed and walk on the Sabbath. It never happened before. There's no way there can be a law for it or against it because it has never happened. So they are creating material, even out of their own material, on the fly to say, this is breaking the law. There were rules of what you could carry and not carry and things, weight and so on and so forth. So they generalize and say you can't carry you can't be healed and pick up your mat and walk. So they asked him. Well, first of all, he replied, but the man who made me well said to me, pick up your mat and walk. In other words, this isn't my idea. I'm just following instructions. Okay? If a man heals me and tells me I'm supposed to do something, logically, I guess I'd do it. I mean, besides that, I need my bed back at the house. And nobody's going to carry it for me anymore because I can walk. So it's up to me to pick up the mat and carry it back to my house. So they asked him, who is the fellow who told you to pick it up and walk? Okay. Now, what are they going to do when they find him? I mean, okay, he's the chief lawbreaker. He's the one telling people to break the law. So he probably needs to be stoned, if nothing else. Now, I always find it challenging to know that somebody who can be healed, someone who can do healing and cause people to be healed is going to be threatened by rocks coming at him. Because I've always thought if he wanted to, he could make the rocks bounce off, right? If he's got the power to heal, he's probably got the power of self-protection, which, by the way, Jesus had in one form or another. We'll find out about that later. But the man who had been healed had no idea who he was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. I don't know, sir. I was so, you normally think people would be so excited to see something like that it would be easy to slip away because the attention is on the man walking, not on the man who did the healing. So Jesus slips away. Now, does that sound like the quote, faith healers of today, whichever ones you want to pick on? I don't know any of the current ones. I haven't watched that in a long, long time. I watched it for a long time. I remember when I had surgery. I had major surgery when I was out of the 5th grade. And I was in cast for 6 weeks, which meant I didn't come to church for 6 weeks, which meant I was at home on Sunday for 6 weeks. And back in those days, there wasn't anything good to watch on Sunday morning TV, okay? Except church. And it wasn't us. We didn't have that. After Herald of Truth, you were through. I mean, it was short, fast, and to the point, and then you were through. So I would watch Oral Roberts. You remember Oral Roberts? He has a university in Oklahoma, but he also was a faith healer. And he would tell you that if you wanted to be healed, if you placed your hands on the television and truly believed, you could be healed. After I did that a few times, then I needed healing on the 3rd-degree burns on my arms, putting them on the television. Those suckers got hot in those days. But notice what I said, quoting the faith healer, modern day faith healer. If you believe, you can be healed. Okay? Did this man believe? there is no evidence whatsoever he believed in anything. He simply explained why he wasn't being healed by the water. And Jesus says, you're healed. And he picks up his mat and walks. So is belief, in a biblical sense, is belief necessary for healing?
No.
Can't
The
be.
purpose of healing is to,
Create belief,
yeah,
not the other way around. And also, we're going to read about a couple of times when people were dead and they were healed or raised back to life, which means they had a dead faith, if they had any faith at all, and couldn't have any effect on the outcome. So we're going to stop there tonight. We'll pick up this gentleman's adventure further on, because we're not through with him just yet, but we'll pick it up from there. We've at least got him up walking around and being accused by the Jews of the minute he's healed, he breaks the law. So we'll see what happens to him next week when we come back and follow up on his story. Thank you for being here, and we will see you all next week.